Welcome to Adventist News and Views, your video source for the latest news and insights shaping the Adventist conversation. Brought to you by Spectrum Magazine. Here are the highlights of this week. Southern Adventist University's Mascot controversy, the power of Black naming traditions, an Ohio pastor's indictment. After 15 years at Andrews University, Chaplain José Bourget will depart, and a critical look at Adventist prophecy. Plus, our video of the week.
Recently, Pastor Frank Zolman and I had the privilege to sit down with Josephine Benton, a pioneer Adventist woman minister at the Sligo Adventist Church.
First up, Philip Warfield critiques Southern Adventist University's recent decision to name its new mascot Forest, highlighting the potential historical and racial implications of the name in Tennessee, particularly its association with Confederate General and Ku Klux Klan founder Nathan Bedford Forrest. While SAU defends the name as a reference to its natural surroundings, the article argues that the university should have consulted historians to avoid unintentionally evoking a painful legacy. It also contextualizes the controversy within SAU's broader historical struggles with racial inclusion and its past unofficial segregation, comparing it to other institutions that have faced reckoning with Confederate symbolism. Warfield urges SAU to establish an institutional archive, support multicultural initiatives, and engage more critically with its history to ensure it does not perpetuate racial insensitivity, advocating for a proactive approach to confronting historical legacies. Ezrika Bennett explores the significance of Black naming traditions and how name erasure reflects broader patterns of marginalization, particularly in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI rollbacks. She traces the historical power of names from slavery, when enslaved individuals were stripped of their identities, to the present, where unique Black names are often mocked or seen as barriers to opportunity. Bennett argues that naming oneself has always been an act of resistance and identity reclamation, reinforcing that names carry history, power, and validation. She critiques the ongoing dismantling of DEI initiatives, likening it to erasure of Black names and stories, and challenges those who oppose DEI to explicitly acknowledge their stance rather than hiding behind euphemisms. Ultimately, she ties the essence of DEI to the Christian gospel, asserting that true faith aligns with inclusivity, equity, and diversity, making the fight for recognition and justice a moral imperative. Ohio Adventist pastor Jesse Santos has been indicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping, gross sexual imposition, and endangering children. Authorities allege that Santos took a 13-year-old extended family member on a camping trip in Ashland County last September, where he made sexual advances towards her. DNA evidence reportedly supports the victim's account. Santos was arrested on February 16 and remains in Ashland County Jail on a $250,000 bond. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges during his arraignment. The Ohio Conference of Seventh-day Adventists has not issued a statement regarding his employment status. The case was reported by Ashland Source and WOIO. After 15 years at Andrews University in various ministry and administrative roles, Chaplain José Bourget will depart on March 8, 2025, to serve as a chaplain for Beacon Health System, reuniting with former AU Administrator Michael Nixon. A graduate of the institution, Bourget played a significant role in fostering spiritual engagement, launching student-led worship initiatives, and leading major strategic projects, including a $2.75 million capital campaign at Pioneer Memorial Church. Reflecting on his tenure, he emphasized the importance of student advocacy and biblical principles in diversity, equity, and inclusion. His departure marks the third faith engagement leader to leave AU in 2 years, amid broader concerns about employee retention. While confident in the university's spiritual leadership moving forward, Bourget hopes AU continues prioritizing student-driven change and faith integration. In his article Case by Casebolt, The 1260-Year Prophecy Problem, Donald Casebolt examines the Millerite and Seventh-day Adventist interpretation of the 1260-year prophetic period, arguing that it is historically unreliable and based on speculation rather than evidence. He highlights that William Miller and Ellen White insisted on prophetic precision, but a review of historical commentators reveals a wide array of conflicting dates for the prophecy's beginning and end. Casebolt asserts that Miller arbitrarily selected 538 as a starting point based on the events in 1798, but this date did not mark the peak of papal power. He also critiques Ellen White's reliance on secondary sources rather than divine revelation, noting that her accounts of the papacy's role in Sabbath persecution were influenced by fallible historians. Ultimately, Casebolt concludes that the traditional Adventist interpretation of the 1260-year prophecy lacks historical validity and is rooted in speculative theological reasoning rather than objective evidence. Spectrum Journal Spotlight. Check out our latest journal pieces featuring in-depth analysis and thoughtful reflections on faith, theology, and contemporary issues. Podcast Spotlight. This week on Adventist Voices, Alexander Carpenter interviews Terry Shaw, discussing Adventist healthcare leadership and the church's role in addressing modern medical challenges. Listen to the full interview anywhere you can get your podcast at Adventist Voices. Spectrum Events. An exclusive exhibition titled Sacred Cinematic Spectacles showcases rare, first edition lithograph film posters and historical props. Curated by Alexander Carpenter, the exhibition explores the spiritual power of material culture and will be on display at La Sierra University's Brandstater Art Gallery from February 18 to March 13, 2025. And finally, our video of the week highlights an interview with Josephine Benton, one of the first Adventist women ministers. She reflects on her journey, the challenges she faced, and the progress made in women's ministry.
Recently, Pastor Frank Zolman and I had the privilege to sit down with Josephine Benton, a pioneer Adventist woman minister at the Sligo Adventist Church. And while we were sitting conversing together, I realized this was a historic moment. So I pulled out my iPhone, and here are a couple of clips that we wanted to share with you on this occasion.
Tell us about how you sensed your own call to ministry.
Well, that experience of my father was imperative in my mind. I saw that he got to do that, and I thought, why can't women and men do this? And I wasn't always rewarded with yes, but the doors did open.
What was it like for you in those the first, when you were given the opportunity to serve as a pastor?
Well, it was many different responses, favorable by some friends that I had. I remember I walked into Sligo Church, my first Sabbath, be on staff there, and a friend walked up to me. He was a member of that church, and he said, well, Josephine, we don't approve this, but we like you. And so that was my first word, was a negative. The idea of a woman in the ministry was foreign to him. He didn't see why that would need to come about. It was not something that he had thought through. In time, different people see that vision. And some people still fight against that vision, I think.
What would you say to some young women? I've had several students who are women who feel a call to ministry. Do you have any words of advice or counsel to them?
Well, as they put it all in the Lord's hands, they accept what occurs and work with it. And different ones of them will need to work with it in different ways. It's, I don't know, it's just the way the Lord works with different people in different situations, and we watch Him, and we do well. I have been privileged to come through an experience from negativism on the part of my dear Adventist friends to support, and now to girls thinking I could do this. So that's a big step. When I was a girl, I didn't have that feeling in a positive way that I could do this. It was more like a question mark in my mind. So it took years, but see, we're all living people, an example of this experience. And it was surely exciting to me when the first Sabbath opened for me to preach and things like that.
What did that feel like for you, to that first Sabbath when you preached?
Well, it was just, this is happening. This is happening in the church, and God is accepting it, and some people are accepting it, and we have to go carefully with that degree of acceptance as it grows.
Anything specifically, what do you think about having a whole conference about women in Adventist history?
It's shocking. It is. As you walked in here and speaking of that, it's not something I've been around hoping it would happen or something. It's just happening.
And will continue to happen as people study the past and learn about those stories and find opportunities to tell those stories.
That's well put. To see the opportunity and the opportunity to tell the stories is amazing to me.
That's it for this week in Adventist News and Views. Subscribe for more stories that matter to the Adventist community, and let's keep the conversation going.